Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game. So, today we're continuing the series. Is that an analog in your pocket? Are you just happy to see me? And today we're talking about the Atari System 1 core that has in recent weeks come over to Analogue Pocket, ported over from a MiSTer FPGA core, which I'll leave a link to in the description below. And while this isn't everyone's favorite system in the world, if you've played these games before, you know there's some fun to be had here. And honestly, getting any sort of new core on Analogue Pocket on the arcade side of things, even if it is just ported from MiSTer developers, is definitely something we should celebrate. Before we get too far involved, it'd be a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined to want to support the channel, got a Patreon link down below as well. But kicking it off, the Atari System 1 was relatively powerful for its time and era, because this is basically mid-80s arcade hardware, and you were not getting any sort of experience like this in the home. Something like Road Blaster here looks absolutely spectacular, even if this was mid-80s hardware. And again, maybe you weren't old enough to play these in arcades when they came out. I certainly wasn't. I was probably 1 or 2, and my driving skills probably hadn't developed at that point in time. But playing them today, some of these games still have a lot of appeal, and they are fun just to kind of play around with when you're on the go on your pocket. But do be aware, as the recording of this video, there's a little bit of weirdness in the core, not the core developer's fault whatsoever or the porter, but there is a change in Analogue Pocket hardware generations on the RAM side of things. So if you see anything like this graphical corruption, which looks like RAM corruption on an actual board, don't be surprised. I know the developer's working on test cores to get rid of some of this, and I have tried one which gets it down to a minimum, but if you see those lines, do not be surprised, it will get fixed. And big thanks to Pixel Cherry Ninja for loaning me out some footage. I do have a newer Pocket, and unfortunately I was getting those lines, which I will show you at different points in this video. But go check out Pixel's channel as well. He's a nice guy, even if he eats too many cans of Heinz beans. But all jokes aside, Road Blaster is doing really well here on Analogue Pocket. It's down to that foundational work from the MiSTer FPGA core, so it's great that we have people porting over that as well, because these are definitely systems that can run on something like Analogue Pocket. And the nice thing about the System 1 is, even if it doesn't have a ton of games, it has a ton of different genres that you can play around in, and Road Blaster is definitely still well worth playing for sure, even if you do have a few lines, and hopefully that gets ironed out soon. It's not the first time that a core has had that problem, depending on the generations. Now weirdly, at least on my updater, it put System 1 into the all folder. It does not show up under arcade, and it does not show up under arcade multi, so if you're trying to find it after you update, just go to all. It should be in there. Another weird little aberration of the core. Now, the Indiana Jones and Temple of Doom game, I think, is just an awesome classic arcade game from the 80s. It is hard, it is fun, it's got some great graphics for its time as well as music, and it also just has a really fun gameplay hook that basically has you almost going through the events of the movie in and of itself. You'll see here, this is my capture, and as I play further, you're going to start seeing those lines start to develop. Because of the RAM differences on Analogue Pocket, you can see something like this. And again, if you had a real arcade board, you started seeing these glitches, the first thing you would start thinking about looking at and changing out would be actual RAM chips. So it's basically like in FPGA, the RAM seems to be failing. I'm not saying the RAM in your Analogue Pocket is failing, I'm just saying that the FPGA implementation, because of the changes in the hardware on Pocket, are exhibiting signs like it was failing on real hardware. But I'm sure, again, this can get patched up relatively quickly if it already hasn't by the time you watch this video. And the further you play into Indiana Jones, at least on my Pocket, the more lines you get. But moving over to a clean footage capture, this is what it should look like, and the gameplay on this one is just fun. It's challenging, it's unique, and if you remember watching the Indiana Jones movies back in the day, or you've watched them recently, it really does adhere relatively well to the events of the movie, and that's always fun. I would say Indiana Jones is my favorite game on this system, but leave me a comment down below and tell me if you've ever played it or not, and what you thought about it, because I've always enjoyed this game. It is definitely worth sitting down and playing, and I think, again, the graphical style is quite good here. And of course, you need to get the Sankara Stone from Mola RAM, and that's fun as well, and I love the lava effect here. The funny thing is, because Pixel did loan me a little bit of footage, he runs all the way around the room trying to get that stone, and the funny part is, it's basically going to troll you into falling into a pit. But if you know the trick, the minute this level starts, you can just literally run straight forward, pause for half a second, and then grab the stone and be out of the level like you never even played the thing. I don't think the developers intended that, but it is a funny little workaround where you can basically just game this game's own systems. But it also has some really nice music, and of course it is Indiana Jones theme, so as long as it doesn't throw up a copyright flag because of Disney and LucasArts, go ahead and listen for 45 seconds, and I'll be back with more Atari System 1 games to enjoy. It's awesome music, and honestly, this is an era in which you weren't even really guaranteed to have musical background tracks in arcade games. A lot of times you just had sound effects, so it works really good coming out of the core. Now moving over to Roadrunner, I remember this game being in my local arcade in like 1991 or 1992 when I was a young kid, and I still to this day think the Roadrunner is the best Looney Tunes character around. He's fast just like your mother, and he's always charming as well. But again, this is another one on the core that's working really well. This is my capture, and you might see a few lines in the backgrounds in the mountains there, those yellow strikes right there. That is the RAM having an issue on my iteration of Analogue Pocket. But I'm just going to show you all of the Roadrunner footage that I captured here so you can understand that every game does something slightly different, and that might just be down to how it's actually implementing and using the RAM on board the Atari System 1 hardware in and of itself. So this is the situation where each game might exhibit something slightly different, or if you have one of the earlier Analogue Pockets, you might not be seeing this issue whatsoever. But again, I can't remember the last core that had this problem. It may have been an IRAM core, but there was a situation in which the RAM needed to be accommodated for across both hardware generations of Analogue Pocket. And honestly, you would have no idea which one you had until an issue presented itself, but it is something that every core developer can code for and have no issue with whatsoever, so I'm sure System 1 will definitely be buttoned up for everybody soon. Now, Roadrunner is such a simple game, but again, it's an arcade game, so it's addictive. Kind of feels like an infinite runner, except you're scrolling the screen, and it kind of feels like the precursor to a rudimentary cell phone style game. So if you like Looney Tunes, I would definitely recommend you check it out. Now moving over to Marble Madness, another classic icon of arcades and home consoles. I can't say that I love this game at all. I've always struggled with the controls, I've always struggled with the momentum, and basically all I do is fall off the edge, which Pixel did here as well. I'll show you some of my captures just so you can see some of the corruption in it. But for the people that love this game, they absolutely love it. And interestingly enough, when I was playing this for the first time on my Analogue Pocket, I wanted to kind of pivot the Pocket to almost use it like a gyroscopic aiming device, which would be a fun thing if anyone could mod it in. But honestly, trying to use the D-pad on this game, it is just very difficult. Even in arcades, this game pulled no punches, but the people that love stuff like this absolutely love it. And I know that because I remember growing up, my father was absolutely in love with Marble Madness, and he could basically beat the entire game in one sitting. He could do the same thing with Dragon's Lair. He basically picks games that no one else really remembered and then just decides to 1cc them long before that was even a term. But if this is one of your favorite games, it's here today on Analogue Pocket, and that is awesome. And you'll see here, this is what it looks like if you do get that graphical corruption. As the screen starts to scroll, you're going to get more lines in it until it basically becomes unreadable. And it doesn't matter if you open up the menu, you're going to have that same issue going on, which is unfortunate, but again, probably already fixed by the time you listen to this. Now moving on to the last game on the core, Peter Pack-Rat. This is probably one that you don't remember and you've never played. I know I've seen it in photographs places, but it's one of those things, maybe I played it 15 years ago, checked it out, and just don't remember it. It's basically Atari's take on something like Donkey Kong, and it is a fun game, it is a challenging game, and now that I played it a little bit more on Pocket, it is something that I'm definitely just going to sit around on the couch and pop a few levels off on. It is a platformer. All you need to do is collect all of the items and get back to your nest before anything touches you, and in theory, that's the easiest thing in the world to do. In practice, this game gets very difficult, and is going to challenge you, and I do love Peter's animation there as well. That's a lot of frames for something in the 80s, and this is another one of those games, maybe you've never heard of it before, maybe you've never played it, but that's the great thing about Analogue Pocket. It's going to give you options to play and experience games you've never seen before. But tell me down below if you knew about Peter Pack-Rabbit and if you played it, because the more I check it out, the more I do seem to enjoy it. But that is the Atari System 1 core on Analogue Pocket. As of the recording of this video, depending on what generation of Pocket you have, you may have some glitches, and I'm sure a lot of you didn't even realize that there was a hardware change in the production of Analogue Pocket somewhere down the line with the RAM chips. You probably never noticed until someone told you about it, until you encountered it yourself. But definitely check out System 1, use whatever updater you want, it'll pull everything down for you, and definitely at least play Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. It's a 10 out of 10. Sure that. See you guys next time. Bye bye.